Okay, before we can even touch on this question, we have to take a bit of a step back. Ghost in the Shell, it started off as a manga. It explored some pretty complex ideas, but stylistically it had an almost a cutesy aesthetic. But it had the odd moment of over-the-top gore on top of that. Strange, but strangely compelling at the same time. The anime movie, that came about a few years after the manga. It was created by a guy called Mamoru Oshii, and he took things in a much darker direction, much more gritty. But at the same time, he slowed the pacing right down and got rid of some of the quirkiness. Makoto, for example, she had some mannerisms that gave rise to some light-hearted moments now and then. Same with a few other characters. This is quintessential Ghost in the Shell. It's more serious, it's more gritty. It's this interpretation that most people think of when you say Ghost in the Shell. Plot-wise, the movie kind of follows the main thread of the manga, but it throws away all the subplots. Finally, you have the anime show. This, again, is another interpretation, by the way. It's darker than the manga, but not quite at the same level as the movie. It is, however, in terms of story, more faithful to the original manga, incorporating more subplots and more ideas. So, the logical side question here is the following. Given that there are 3 distinct interpretations of Ghost in the Shell, and therefore 3 separate universes, what, if anything, unifies each of them? Is there anything at all that can be said to be the vital component between all 3 of them? What is it that makes Ghost in the Shell Ghost in the Shell? This, of course, is a little bit subjective, but for me personally, it's the ideas that it tries to explore, or at the very least tries to pose to the person watching. So stuff like, what is identity? Or how thin is the line between something human and something robotic? Okay, so we've established pretty much that every time Ghost in the Shell had a new iteration, it pretty much got reimagined. So, in light of that, the live-action movie, the live-action remake, if you will, it can only really fail if it completely discards the philosophical underpinnings, the interesting questions. But even then, it only fails at being an authentic Ghost in the Shell movie. It can still be a pretty damn solid mainstream action film. And I know, that's probably not going to convince a lot of people right now, particularly a big chunk of the fan base who want nothing to do with this remake. But hear me out here, okay? If you fall into that camp, you were probably expecting something that was never going to really happen. And let me explain. We're in an age right now where Hollywood does not take risks. It wants blockbusters that are almost guaranteed to sell, to make money. Something like Ghost in the Shell was always going to be, let's say, simplified to an extent. The original Ghost in the Shell movie is a weird and wonderful thing. It's very abstract, it's complex. That was never, in a million years, going to just be made shot for shot, frame for frame, in a live-action remake. It was never going to happen. Okay? And you know what? If such a movie would have been made, Ghost in the Shell or not, you can bet your fucking house that it would not have the budget that it does now. And quite frankly, just wouldn't do Ghost in the Shell justice. It was always going to be a pick your poison type of scenario. But here's the good news, if you consider that good news. At the very worst, this still looks like a very good, solid action movie, and one that can act as a decent stepping stone into the more complex back catalogue of Ghost in the Shell. I've already seen countless YouTube videos reacting to the trailer or the shelling sequence by people who make reaction videos or whatever. They're completely fresh to this series, and they are really keen, really eager to watch the original source material, the original movie and the original TV show. That in itself is worthwhile in my opinion.
You're talking about redefining my identity. I want to guarantee that I can still be myself.
There isn't one. Why would you wish to? All things change in a dynamic environment. Your effort to remain what you are is what limits you.
This also could have some really cool future implications as well. If Ghost in the Shell is successful, we could see some more live-action adaptations. Preferably, though, I would like to see more television adaptations with better, more accomplished directors. And that is a real possibility. In recent years, the anime Monster was very close to being greenlit as a television series by a director called Guillermo del Toro, the guy who made Pan's Labyrinth. That was really, really close to actually being greenlit. But you know what? People don't like to take risks. And anime adaptations simply weren't a known quantity. So if something like this succeeds, we could see a whole string of really cool, really good adaptations. And that is something I personally would really like to see. Thank you for listening, guys, and I'm glad you spent the time just listening to my opinion.